There's something inherently unsettling about abandoned places. They carry a weight, a silence that feels too heavy, as if the walls themselves are holding on to secrets. This story begins with my friends and me, a group of thrill seekers in our mid-20s, deciding to explore an old house on the outskirts of town. It was late autumn in 2022, and the trees were barren, their skeletal branches clawing at the gray sky. The air carried the unmistakable chill of an early frost. The house had a reputation, you know the kind, the one whispered about at sleepovers and around campfires. Locals called it the widow's house. Legend had it that a reclusive woman had lived there decades ago and had vanished without a trace. Some said she was murdered. Others claimed she simply walked into the woods one day and never returned. Whatever the truth, the house had stood empty for years, slowly being consumed by time and nature. "Let's check it out," Mark had suggested. He was the fearless one in our group, always eager for an adrenaline rush. "It's just an old house," Emma had added, her tone casual but her eyes betraying her nervousness. She wasn't as brave as Mark but hated being left out. "What's the worst that could happen?" I had joked, though even then, a small voice in the back of my mind was urging me to stay home. By the time we arrived, the sun had dipped below the horizon, and the house stood like a dark silhouette against the fiery orange of the sky. It was 2 stories tall, with boarded-up windows and a sagging roof. The front yard was overgrown with weeds, and a rusted gate hung on its hinges. The place looked like something out of a horror movie. We parked the car a few hundred feet away and approached on foot, the crunch of gravel under our shoes sounding unnaturally loud in the quiet. Mark was the first to reach the gate, pushing it open with a loud creak that made Emma wince. "Welcome to the widow's house," he said with a dramatic sweep of his arm. "Let's just get this over with," Emma muttered, pulling her jacket tighter around her. The front door was locked, but Mark found an open window on the side. We climbed through one by one, landing in what appeared to be the living room. The air inside was stale, thick with the smell of mildew and decay. Dust motes floated in the beam of Mark's flashlight as he swept it across the room. "Creepy," Emma whispered, her voice barely audible. The room was sparsely furnished, with an old couch covered in a white sheet and a coffee table littered with yellowed newspapers. A cracked mirror hung on one wall, reflecting the beam of the flashlight and casting strange shadows. "Let's split up," Mark suggested, his enthusiasm undeterred. "Why do they always do that in horror movies?" Emma hissed. "It's a terrible idea." "We'll cover more ground," Mark argued. Reluctantly, we agreed. Mark headed upstairs, Emma went toward the kitchen, and I stayed in the living room, drawn to the cracked mirror. There was something about it that unnerved me, the way it seemed to distort my reflection, making it look not quite human. I turned away, telling myself it was just my imagination. The house was eerily quiet, save for the occasional creak of the floorboards under our feet. Every now and then, I'd hear Emma's footsteps or Mark's voice calling out from upstairs. I was inspecting an old bookshelf when I heard a faint sound, like a whisper. I froze, straining to listen. It came again, soft and indistinct, like the rustle of fabric or a breath. "Mark?" I called, my voice shaking slightly. No response. I moved toward the sound, my flashlight trembling in my hand. It seemed to be coming from the hallway that led to the back of the house. The air grew colder as I approached, and the whispering grew louder, though I still couldn't make out the words. My heart was pounding as I reached the end of the hallway, where a door stood slightly ajar. I pushed it open, revealing a small room with peeling wallpaper and a single wooden chair in the center. The whispering stopped the moment I stepped inside. The silence was deafening, pressing in on me from all sides. My flashlight flickered, casting erratic shadows on the walls. Then I saw it. Etched into the floorboards beneath the chair was a symbol, a jagged circle with strange markings around it. My stomach turned as I stared at it, an overwhelming sense of dread washing over me. "Emma?" I called again, louder this time. Footsteps thundered down the hallway, and Emma appeared in the doorway, her face pale. "What's wrong?" she asked. I pointed to the floor. "What the hell is that?" She stepped closer, her eyes widening as she took in the symbol. "Mark needs to see this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. We found Mark upstairs, standing in what appeared to be a bedroom. He was staring at something on the wall, his flashlight beam illuminating a series of photographs. They were old, black and white, and all featured the same woman. She was young and beautiful, with dark hair and piercing eyes, but there was something unsettling about her expression. In every photo, she seemed to be staring directly at the camera, her lips curled into a faint, knowing smile. "I think this is her," Mark said, his voice uncharacteristically quiet. "The widow." Emma and I exchanged uneasy glances. "We found something downstairs," I said. "You need to see it." Reluctantly, Mark followed us back to the small room. His reaction to the symbol was immediate. "We need to leave," he said, his voice firm. "Now." "What? Why?" Emma asked. "It's just a weird carving." Mark shook his head. "No, it's not. I've seen this before. It's a summoning symbol." "A summoning symbol for what?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. Before Mark could respond, a loud crash echoed through the house, followed by the sound of footsteps. Heavy, deliberate footsteps coming from the direction of the front door. "Someone's here," Emma whispered, her face white with fear. Mark gestured for us to stay quiet, and we huddled together in the corner of the room, our flashlights turned off. The footsteps grew louder, closer. Whoever it was, they weren't in a hurry. Each step was slow and deliberate, the floorboards creaking under their weight. My heart was pounding so loudly I was sure they could hear it. The footsteps stopped just outside the room, and the door creaked open. In the faint light from the hallway, I could make out a tall figure, their face obscured by the shadows. "Who's there?" Mark demanded, his voice shaking. The figure didn't respond. Instead, they took a step forward, and I saw something glint in their hand. A knife. "Run!" Mark shouted, and we bolted past the figure, Emma letting out a scream as they reached for her. We sprinted down the hallway and through the living room, not stopping until we were outside. The night air was freezing, but I didn't care. We piled into the car, Mark fumbling with the keys as he started the engine. As we sped away, I glanced back at the house. The figure was standing in the doorway, watching us leave. None of us spoke on the drive back to town. When we finally stopped, Mark turned to us, his face pale. "We're never going back there," he said. We all nodded in agreement. Whatever we had disturbed in that house, it was clear we weren't welcome. And as much as I try to convince myself it's over, I can't shake the feeling that something followed us home.